Hi, I'm Sarah Babb. I'm at the USB Ed. We read for you. The book I've been summarizing is Emotional Agility by Susan David. It's a fabulous book that talks about how to unhook yourself from the emotional narratives and gives some practical tools as to how to show up, step out and move on. What follows is a summary or edited version of the presentation. So I do need to start with how are you? So you can pop out some words because we're talking about emotions. So often, how do we answer, how are you? Fine. Okay, so now let me ask again. So how are you feeling? Fine, still fine. This is really hard, right? And then we go, well, so how are you feeling really? Okay, then you kind of go, yes? Okay, oh, so it's gone downgraded from fine to okay. So maybe there's maybe a bit frustrated, maybe pressured, you've rushed to be here, maybe you're feeling curious, open, happy. Do we have labels for those emotions even? Do we even know what we're feeling in the time? Can we name it? And then the question is, so if you can name a feeling, what do you do with it? And for me, what do we do with it? Do we sit with it? Do we hold it? Do we let it go? Do we ignore it? Do we suppress it? Do we work with it? Do we lean into it? Do we not even know it's there? And so this is, for me, a really good starting point to think about our how we respond to our emotions. And the problem with when we get rigid about emotions is then we treat them as if they are directives. So we start associating our identity with those emotions. So we go, I am grumpy, and then we're grumpy, Mr. Grumpy for the rest of the day. So what I find quite liberating about the book is she really talks about what's that space between the stimulus and the response. And if we can pause and just be in that space a bit, it frees us up to be agile, to choose a response that can be more supportive of having a good day, of supporting us to achieve our goals, of actually achieving success. And we don't need to be stuck. She's really passionate about how can we really use our everyday behaviors to take us towards our success or towards our true selves or to be in alignment with our values. So rigidity, she says, we own our emotions, they don't own us. So these are some of the premises we need to check ourselves. And a simple technique to not say, how are you? I'm okay, I'm happy, I'm sad, but to say, I am feeling happy and sad. So she describes emotional agility as a process that allows you to be in the moment, changing and maintaining your behaviors so that you can live in ways that align with your intentions and your values. And the process, she says, is not about ignoring those difficult emotions. So when we're feeling sad, when we get hooked by that sadness, and that becomes an overwhelming mood and premise to which we view the world. But when we can hold emotions loosely, facing them courageously and compassionately, then we can move past them, and then big things can happen. Let's see what your comments are. If you complete the sentence, in your own mind, what are you telling yourself about yourself? Someone else succeeded. Sometimes the language can be, oh, that meant I failed, or why did they get it and not me? You know, just automatically these beliefs and these narratives come into our head. So she gives these examples in the book just to show what hooked means and how those old narratives, those old stories come into our head that overlays, that keeps us rigid in our responses to everyday situations, because that's what we're running around filtering the world with. So hooked means that we actually think those statements in our head are true. And the problem is we don't realize that a lot of those narratives are outdated. And so having the distance from those helps you reflect and say, does it serve me to believe that? So these are the hooks. We thought blame. So in other words, we get hooked by thoughts and then we don't act. So I think I can't do it and therefore I don't do it, full stop. We get hooked by monkey-mindedness. Oh, but it didn't work in the past, it'll never work in the future. Oh, it's going to be awful. Imagine if I embarrass myself. We get stuck in old, outgrown ideas, wrong-headed righteousness. So it's for us to be aware of where are we hooked, and to just begin to notice. But the problem even then is that when we're trying to unhook, we engage in even more energy-sapping responses. So see which one you can relate to. Are you a bottler and you just bottle away the emotions? So we don't go there. I'm not going to deal with the anger, the frustration, the disappointment, the regret, the brooders. We stew in our misery. She talks, interestingly enough, in the book about another way of energy sapping unhooking is when we just want to lather everything with a smile and try and force happiness. So she says when we don't go to the source of our difficult emotions, we miss the ability to really deal once and for all with what's causing that distress. She believes that our raw feelings can actually be messengers, that they actually are telling us something. So they're telling us something that's maybe it's misaligned with my values, or I don't believe, or it's something that's not true about myself. So these are the 4 essential movements, and I'll talk through each of them briefly. So the first thing that she says is actually what we want to do is show up to our emotions. So not run away, not bottled up, deny, but just label, notice. Then she talks about stepping out, and I'll talk through each of these. So how do we get more of a distance so that we've got some choice around it? And then she gives really useful tips on how to move on. Showing up, when we show up fully, she talks about with awareness and acceptance. And I think that's the trick. Show up with compassion and curiosity and go, gosh, there's this guilty feeling. I ate that chocolate cake. And I go, okay, you're here, I'm not going to layer it, let's talk. Because I'm big enough to contain all my emotions. And she says, of course, it does take guts because we've often hidden away from some of those things. So compassion, what she terms, gives us that freedom to redefine ourselves. And so that choice is really the turning point in what she's offering in this book, is that once we show up, then we can have a choice. And how can we choose a willingness? So I want to quote, I've got a few quotes because I love the way she phrases. We all want a life to be as dazzling and painless as possible. But life, on the other hand, has a way of humbling us. And heartbreak is built into its agreement with the world. One of the greatest human triumphs is to choose to make room in our hearts for both joy and pain. Once we stop struggling to eliminate distressing feelings or to smother them, that's when we can learn from them. And then the next movement can come in. So we just show up to our emotions, and then we can step out. And that's that space that you have a choice. So I feel that craving, but I don't have to act on it. So she talks about we do need to have some mindfulness in that. And so mindfulness for her is about that stepping out, that you can observe the thinker inside. And of course, breath is the traditional way to come back to that. So if I just ask us to breathe, centers where, brings us back to where we are, out of our monkey minds. So another way of stepping out is just contradict yourself. So, gosh, I'm not boring. I can be exciting. When am I exciting? What does that look like? Also, to call it out, that's a naming it. So, and talk to yourself in a third person. Like, hi, Sarah, how's your boring self today? Like it just is, just like, no, you can't but let it go. Letting go could mean just holding it a bit more lightly, a little bit more humorously, a little bit more gently. And that could expand your heart. And that doesn't mean that you've, resigned yourself to fate. The third movement then is, so how do we do this? And so Susan talks about it's the art of living by your personal set of values, that your behaviors and beliefs that you hold dear, that's what gives you the sense of meaning. So if you really value caring and you find that you're spending time volunteering or looking after your team or really caring for a business venture, that's when you feel fulfilled, right, and engaged and vital in your life. You have a choice point every hundreds of times in a day. Do I go for the scone or do I go for the vegetable rice wrap? But if I've got my intention in mind, then that choice point becomes easier, and actually I feel better at the end of the day because I've lived to what I want to. So we want to make decisions that match up with the way that you hope to live. What do I want my life to be about? And how do I feel most of the time? What's that general lens? And which kind of situations make me feel the most vital? When do I feel most alive and most connected? And when you know about those things that you care about, then you can free yourself from the things you don't care about. And those are your choice points. But when you know what you value and what you want and what's important to you, then those choice points present you with that opportunity to walk your why And we all know the why from Simon Sinek and others that say that that's what brings meaning. So how do we bring that meaning into our everyday life? Will you move towards your values and act like the person you wish to be, or will you move away from your values and act against them? So the more you choose moves towards your values, the more vital, effective, and meaningful your life is likely to be. And of course, there are goal conflicts, so this is not about a perfect life, and sometimes making those choices can be liberating because it really is about defining truly who you are. So here are some of the tips and tools that I find hugely valuable. There are 2 principles. She talks about the tiny tweaks principle, and there are 3 things you can do with this. The first is we'll change your mindset about that situation. So when you know what your why is, then you can check what is my want to in this. So yes, it's a project and it's a hard work and I'm going to work till 3 a.m. or it's going to be a difficult team. Yes, it might be hard, but if you're connecting with I want to do this because it links with my why of adding value and innovating and being a change agent, then it becomes easier. It becomes more fulfilling. Then this is the big one. So the third way to change or way of moving on from emotion or into emotional agility is through changing your habits so that it becomes part of your everyday life. So if we think of every situation, there's an intention, your why or you want to. There's a context, and then you have a choice point. So this is what led me to eat the vegetable rice roll, right? Was that here's my intention, here's my context, and I have a choice. So other ways to change your habits, which are also really useful ways to think about this, is she says there's like a no-brainer. So if your intention is this person who is exercising and losing weight, then you just don't have sweet foods in the house. You only have healthy snacks. It's a no-brainer. So you change the context so that it can support the habit that you want. Piggyback your habits. So your habit is you come home, you put your key, well I do, put keys in the drawer and the bag goes in a certain place. Put your phone in with that. So that becomes the piggyback a habit. Then your phone's with a habit. So it's not recreating a new habit. So easy to change. Another way of changing your habit is the pre-commitment. So this apparently is actually found to be really, really powerful. So you say tomorrow I'm going to go for a run at 6 o'clock. The night before you make a commitment to yourself. When that alarm goes off, I will not press snooze. I will get up and put on the sneakers. And then the other thing she said that really works well is mental contrasting. So actually to think about obstacles that could get in the way of you changing your habit. So really practical ways to move on from those emotional hooks and rigidity. Tiny tweaks. Number 1, think what's my mindset around this? What is my motivation around this, and how can I change my habit around this? So the habits, how do we change that? We're becoming aware of our intention, our context, our choice. There are choice points every day, every moment. What do I choose to be in line with my why? And how do we change habits? The no-brainer, just take away the temptation or take away the situations. The piggyback, so you hook up your habits with an existing habit, then it's easy to change. The pre-commitment, so you commit, and then the obstacle course. So what might get in my way of changing that habit or being in that way that I want to be? And then we've got the second principle, which is the seesaw principle. So I think we can all relate to that, where it's basically saying live in the zone of optimal development. So we want to live on that edge of not feeling overwhelmed, but we always moving away from complacency towards developing a new competence, trying a new thing, stretching ourselves. And so she says we want to stay whelmed, not overwhelmed, but whelmed. So we want to just stay at that zone of I'm not complacent and comfortable, but I have some effortful learning. That keeps us fresh, that keeps us alert, that keeps us alive. But keep it workable, keep it going, keep it growing. And that's the difference between grit and quit. So she really says that the principle of seesawing out of comfort, not too stretched, not overcompetent, but finding that balance of being whelmed is a way of staying agile and fresh. And that's it.